Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about everything that I read in January. It is only January 27th, so technically I still have 4 more days of January. But I'm filming this early because I finished all of the books that I wanted to read in January. And I was able to check off every single challenge for the Brighter Winter Reading Challenge. And that is a first for me, people. I am so happy that I was able to do that. I'm so proud of myself, honestly, because I've been doing this. I think this is my 4th year doing this, and this is the first time that I was able to check off every single challenge on the list. That's specifically for a book, I should say, because there are 2 that I haven't checked off yet that say share a book quote with a friend, and then ask someone what they're reading. But I still have time for those. But I was able to read every single book that I wanted to read and check off all the challenges that were for books specifically. So we're just going to get started. I read a total of 10 books, which again, I can't believe happened. It's crazy really, because I'm learning that I can get a lot more read if I read 1 book at a time. Who would have thought? But that's where I am right now. I've figured that out and I might stick with that. I'm not really sure. It might change depending on my mood, but this is what's working now, so I will probably stick with that, just reading 1 book at a time. But we're just gonna go ahead and get right into this because I don't have a lot of time to just sit here and chit chat about a lot of things, and you know I can get long-winded here. But first, coffee. Alright, so the first one that I read was Charlotte's Web. This one was to fulfill the prompt of reading a new to me junior book, mid-grade book, and this was the first time that I ever read Charlotte's Web. I knew the story, I've seen the movies, but anyway, I absolutely loved this book. It might be my new favorite mid-grade book. It's just a wonderful story, obviously, and yeah, the writing was excellent. I loved the characters. I love how E.B.White brought out each character's personality, like all of the different animals. They each had their own unique personalities, and it was all brought out so fantastically. It was just well done. I loved this one. Easily a 5-star read for me. I will say most of the books that I read this month were excellent reads, and I gave most of them 4 or 5 stars. There are a few 3.5 and 3 stars, but yeah, it was just an excellent reading month, I think. But the next one was, whoa, I'm losing all of my books here. The next one that I read was for the prompt of reading a book that was published in 2022. And that one was Counterfeit Kingdom. Come on, focus on the book, not me. Was Counterfeit Kingdom by Holly Pivec and R. Douglas Geivett. He commented on one of my previous videos and said that that is the preferred pronunciation of his last name, so thank you. But anyway, this is just basically a book that they dive into the various teachings of a movement called the NAR. I don't think very many people are really aware that it is even a movement, and some might argue that it's not a movement, but yeah, they just dive into the different nuances of it, and primarily focusing on the teachings that come from Bethel and Hillsong that are simply anti-biblical, and how a lot of their teachings are actually spread through their music that they have. And I, for one, have listened and loved many songs for over the past, I don't know how many years, that came from Bethel and Hillsong. And I had heard over the years as well, like some people were a little skeptical about their music, and then different things that were coming out from the actual church and the leadership there, and I often would just, sweep those under the rug. I didn't really follow the teachings of the church. I was just like, if I like their songs and if I think their songs line up or are theologically and biblically sound, then I'm not really going to worry about it. But this book has really made me rethink that stance on some of those things, and yeah, I'm still thinking and praying about it. the thing is, for me, I never want something like music that I love to be something that's so important to me that if it is dishonoring to God and it's not biblically sound, or even if it is, like, it's one of those things, I just never want something to be so important to me that I can't let it go, if that's what God is asking me to do. Because for me, while I love music, singing and music is like another big passion for me, and I love like good quality music. And I never really thought that Hillsong of Bethel was just like this outstanding musical performance, and like if I would just look at it musically speaking, I never really thought that it was like, wow, these guys are amazing singers and their music is like, the actual music production is phenomenal. I never really thought those things. It was just more like I liked some of the words and I liked how they made me feel, and that's the thing about their music, is very emotionally driven, which is not always a bad thing. Don't hear me say that. But yeah. There is just so much more other music out there that I love, that I know is biblically sound. There are just a lot of other artists out there that I know are biblically sound and theologically sound that I can listen to. It's not like I have to listen to Hillsong, I have to listen to Bethel, I have to have those songs in my life. I really don't. And so, like, I'm not, and this is not me saying that you should get rid of all of those songs. This is just a conviction that God has laid on my heart personally, and I can't ignore it. But basically, I would recommend this book. Even if you come away from this book disagreeing with their conclusions, then that's okay. But I think it's really good for us to just really dive into some of those things that are the popular messages coming from these churches and this movement specifically. Like, I don't want to just like come against Bethel and Hillsong, because I genuinely believe that there are people within those churches who are true Christians, and they just may not be aware of some of these things because they've been indoctrinated. And like, there's a lot of stories in here about how like manipulative people can be within the church, and if you don't follow their teachings, it can be very damaging. Like, basically, there's just a lot of testimonies in this book about people who've been hurt by leadership in these movements, and like families, like parents being rejected by their children because they disagree with some of the teachings, and it's like tearing families apart. And like, so there's just some of those things that they bring out in this book that have just really made me like sit back and like, okay, hold up, what's going on here? Something's not right. And I think they give a really fair and honest opinion on these things. And yeah, I would really recommend reading this, even if you don't agree with it, even like just to simply get outside of your little box and worldview and things that you may hold dear. Like, just to relook at it, just to reevaluate it, and like go to the Bible and like be in that constant communion with God in prayer and asking Him, is this of you? Do I want this in my life? So yeah, there's just so much in this book. Like, I really want to read it again, just to go like over some of the things again that I might have missed the first time. But yeah, it was very sobering to read and eye-opening, and basically I think it's just important for us who call ourselves Christians to critically examine every teaching that comes out and go back to the scripture as our foundation and make sure that it lines up. And if you walk away from it thinking that, okay, it's still biblically sound, then that's okay. I'm not the Holy Spirit. I'm not going to try to convict you. But yes, I recommend this book if you are curious to look into that movement and want to see what they have to say about it. But anyway, I gave it 5 stars. I really loved it, and it was very challenging and eye-opening for me personally. But anyway, moving on. The next one that I read was for the prompt to read a collection of short stories, and I chose Aesop's Fables. Like I said in previous videos, I want to read more of my physical TBR books that are on my bookshelves for these challenges, and besides 3 books from the library, because I didn't have any that fit the prompt on my shelves, and one of the prompts was to actually choose a book from the library. But I was able to do that for most of these books. I was able to pick the books off of my bookshelves, which was fantastic. But anyway, Aesop's Fables. This was really fun, really interesting. A lot of the little fables felt a little redundant, like they were sharing the same story. There's a lot of the same animals used, but it was really fun to go back to some of the old ones that I remember reading as a child and then discovering new ones. I loved some of them. I was like, meh, about some of the others, but it was still a fun read and it was good. I like the character, like the character examples of good character and yeah, good morals that are taught in some of the fables. And then some of the others I was just like, okay, sure, whatever. It was just a fun read to go back to. The next one then was When Breath Becomes Air by Paul. I looked up the name when I was actually reading the book because I wanted to make sure that I said it correctly. Yes, it is. When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, I believe is the correct pronunciation. So this one was to fulfill the prompt for reading a medical memoir. And so Paul was a up-and-coming brain surgeon. Yes, a neurosurgeon, I should say, and was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And this was just his journey through that. What did I rate this? Yes, I rated it 4 stars. The writing is absolutely beautiful, and the story itself is heartbreaking, but yes, I did give it 4 stars. I really enjoyed reading it. It was, like I said, he has his way with words is just absolutely beautiful. Most of the beginning of the book is mostly about his journey from like being a young man to becoming a doctor, and then it's more like the last quarter of the book was about his actual like journey with cancer and all of that. But it was still really good. Some content considerations, there are a few swear words, but it was very minimal and just like I think it was just like 1 or 2, but yeah, it was a beautiful book and I'm glad I was able to read that. The next one was Suffering is Never for Nothing by Elizabeth Elliot. I read it on my Kindle, but I'll put the cover here. So I had listened to this book last year on audiobook, but I wanted to actually read the physical book again, and that was to fulfill a prompt of reading a nonfiction book by a Christian female author. And it was just an excellent book to go back to. Like I said, I listened to it on audio, but just reading it again and seeing the actual words in front of me was just really great, and I love it. 5 stars. I love her perspective on suffering and just want to learn from her. If you don't know who Elizabeth Elliot is, where have you been? She was the wife of Jim Elliot, one of the 5 missionaries killed by the Waldani people down in Ecuador. Many years ago. But so she lost her first husband, Jim, and then she married again and lost that husband to cancer, and then she married again, and I think he also died before she did. And so yeah, I think she knows a little bit about suffering, but she says in her book that she doesn't claim to know everything about suffering because she hasn't experienced everything that other people have gone through. We all go through different sufferings, and sometimes we may think that other people's sufferings isn't near as bad as ours, but the thing is, we all do go through suffering, and it's simply a part of living in this broken world. And I love her perspective of like just learning to trust the character of God and who he is, and recognizing that he works all things for good, and that we can trust his plan in everything. So when I listened to this book last year, it was after my miscarriage, and I was really wrestling with God and his character and questioning his goodness and his faithfulness and just his plans and everything, and I just was wrestling really hard through grief. And so when I heard some of these things that she said, the place that I was in then just made me angry in a sense, because I was like, how can you actually say these things? Because it does not make sense. It doesn't line up with reality. Like, if we look at our circumstances and base God's character off of that, he doesn't look good. But we have to take our eyes off of the circumstances and back on him, and we can see his goodness. And the thing is, we may never know the purpose of our pain until we get to heaven, but sometimes he does actually allow us to see his plan in fulfillment, like through all of the pain here on earth, and that's a blessing sometimes. But then other times we're just caught in that mystery of why, and it is that tension that we have to hold just because we live here in this broken world. But yeah, the book just really helped me change my perspective on suffering. But like I said in the vlog that I'm currently filming for this week as well, like I was wrestling again this last week, and so I don't have a handle on suffering yet either, but I'm learning. My heart and my perspective of it is changing only by the grace of God. And so if you are going through hard times, I would really recommend this book. Yeah, it was such a great encouragement, and I love all of Elizabeth Elliot's writings. But anyway, the next one that I read then was actually a buddy read with Erica. It fulfilled 2 prompts, reading a book with a green cover, where the main color is green, I should say. Come on, focus, there we go. And then it also filled the prompt of doing a buddy read. And so yeah, this one is The Innkeeper of Ivy Hill by Julie Klassen. I rated it, did I rate it 3.5 stars? 4 stars? Yeah, I did give it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. This was the first Julie Klassen that I read, so I'm still a little unsure if I actually like her writing. I did enjoy the book, but I told Erica while we were reading it that I'm just comparing it too much to the Gresham Chronicle books by Luana Blackwell that I read last year. It was a trilogy, and I absolutely loved those books. It was just beautiful. The character development and just the way she wrote, like the settings and everything, was absolutely beautiful. And this one just felt like it lacked some of those qualities. It left me wondering like a lot about some of the characters and their stories in here. I'm like, I want to know more about them. But there are some other books in this series, I think, so I'm not giving up on them. I did enjoy the story, and it got better as it went, and I did slowly become invested in each character's storyline. But yeah, Julie Klassen actually does reference the Gresham Chronicles in the author's note at the end of the book, and so that made more sense to me when I found that out, because it felt so similar to the Gresham Chronicles. And having just read the Gresham Chronicles, I found this one to be just a little lacking because I loved those others so much, but I still enjoyed it. I would still recommend it. I want to read more of the series to see if there is more character development, and if I end up liking the rest of the series. I don't know, we'll see for sure. But anyway, there's that. Okay, so then the next book that I read was The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie. I said in my January TBR that this is the first of the Miss Marple series. I was wrong. I think it's the second one, but it doesn't really matter. This was to fulfill the prompt of reading a book with the protagonist is over 60 years old. So I had never read any of the Miss Marple books yet, and this was the first one that I picked up because it was available from the library. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Since I haven't read any of the Miss Marple books, any of the other Miss Marple books, I have a question. So you guys who have read the others, let me know. But this one was not written from the perspective of Miss Marple. It was written from the point of view of the vicar. And Miss Marple only showed up a few times in the book, and I found that a little disappointing. Is that how it is for all of the books? Like, is she just kind of a side character that comes in and helps them solve the mystery, or are other books like actually from her perspective? Because I felt like I just didn't see her as much. I'm like, she is the detective, I want to see more of her. And it was just a lot of other things happening in the book. So that was my main like disappointment about the book, but otherwise I actually really enjoyed the mystery. I did not figure it out. I wanted to try to figure it out, who the culprit was, but obviously it didn't happen, and I feel like it's kind of hard to actually figure out Agatha Christie's solutions until the very end, when she reveals it. But anyway, I did enjoy this one. I think I gave it 4 stars, but Yeah, let me know about that, if she is more of a main character or if it's more from her point of view in other books in the Miss Marple series. If not, that's okay. I enjoy Agatha Christie's books enough to keep reading them, but Tommy and Tuppence one that I read, why can't I think of, The Secret Adversary, I think is what it was called. I loved that one because it was written from Tommy and Tuppence's point of view, and like just seeing their side of things, of them trying to solve the mystery, was a lot of fun, and so that's the only thing that I found lacking in that book, but otherwise I still enjoyed it. Then the next one was I Was Dr Mendels Assistant. Yeah, this one. I cannot pronounce the author's name, so I'm not even gonna try. He was a Hungarian doctor who, before he was captured and taken to the Auschwitz prison camp, he was what do they call it? He was in forensic medicine, I guess, and was doing autopsies to discover things about what caused the person's death and all of that. And so when he was brought to the Auschwitz prison camp, Dr. Mendel, the head doctor there at the camp, asked for people to like come forward and give their credentials of things, and because he wanted a professional doctor to work with him in the camp to do autopsies on the bodies of the millions of victims that came through the camp. And so he was an actual prisoner. Like, I wasn't sure when I went in, like, if he was part of the Nazi, like, if he was part of the SS, like, if he was actually a Nazi person and he just spoke out about the things that they did, but he was actually a prisoner, and so he was forced to do a lot of these things that Dr. Mendel was doing. Yeah. Dr. Mendel was part of the group of people who were trying to find ways to build the master race, and so he had a lot of theories that were just based in pseudoscience that were not real. And yeah, the author of this book just really exposed a lot of the horrible, horrible things that Dr. Mendel and other doctors in the camp did, just the way that they would experiment on people. It was awful. I read this book and the whole time almost my face was just twisted in horror and my stomach was knotted up with nausea. It was awful. Most of us, I would hope, are at least aware of the Auschwitz prison camp and other concentration camps that the Nazis had set up. But Auschwitz was a death camp. That's what it was. People went there to die, and that was its sole purpose. Was is my battery dying? I'm gonna have to change it. Buddy, Carmen still wants to sit here. Can Carmen sit here? Can you scoot over? There you go. Do you want to sit in the blankets? Do you want to sit on the cozy? There you go. Good boy. Like I said, I think most of us are aware that that this camp existed, that millions of Jews and other people were exterminated there in the camp with the gas chambers and the crematoriums and all of that. But this book goes into so much more detail about how awful the conditions were at the camp, the different experiments that the doctors did, just how it's awful. And I'm glad I read it, but I didn't give it a star rating. I just wasn't sure what to rate it, because I'm very grateful that this man survived and was able to share the truth of what went on in the camp. He was also invited to the Nuremberg trials at the end of the war to be a witness and give testimony to what happened, because obviously at liberation the Nazis wanted to destroy the camp and destroy all evidence of what was going on in the camp. But he obviously survived. He was the only surviving doctor that was a prisoner in the camp that worked with Dr. Mendel. He was I think he was the only survivor. And so, yeah, I'm just grateful he survived, and I'm grateful that he was able to put this down and share the truth of what happened to the world. Yeah. This is the kind of book that will really make you wrestle with the problem of evil and why God would allow things like this to happen. Like this kind of suffering that happened in this book is just like one of those things that seems unnecessary, and it was simply for the selfish and pure evil of some people and their ideologies. So yeah, there's that one. I would give strong caution of going in and reading this. It's gruesome, it's hard, it's sobering, but I'm glad we have this book, and I'm glad that we know the truth of what happened, and we can pray that things like this will never happen again. And who knows, there might be things like this happening around the world that we don't even know about. But yeah, that one. This one was to fulfill a prompt of reading a book that was outside of your comfort zone or on a topic that you're not comfortable with, and it definitely fit that one because it was hard. I could only read a few chapters at a time, and I had to put it down and like do a palate cleanser because it was just that awful and that gruesome. It was terrible. So because Dr. Mendels Assistant, that book was so terrible, I wanted a palate cleanser, one that was more lighthearted and fun, and so I picked up the Martian by Andy Weir. This one was to fill the prompt for reading a debut novel. So this one was actually my husband's book that I read. I actually read this one, the original one, and this one is the classroom edition. Anyway, I went into the book knowing the spoilers, knowing how it all turns out, because I'd seen the movie because my husband loves The Martian, and he recommended this book to me, and I really actually enjoyed it. I'd never read sci-fi before, and this one was, I'm not really into sci-fi, and I'm also not really into space. Space terrifies me. For one, like, my husband always asks me, if someone would invite you to go to space for free, would you go? And I'm like, no. I'm gonna stay on planet Earth where I was meant to be until I die. Like, that is the only time I'm leaving planet Earth, is when I die. Like, I am okay with staying here on a life-sustaining planet where the things that happened in this book, I know it's fiction, okay? But, like, this is very real. Space travel is dangerous. So I'm going to leave it to the few brave and insane people. Let them do it. There's plenty of other people who would love to go to space. I'll let them take the free rides up there. I'm not going. I'll stay here. But anyway, so I went in not really sure if I would enjoy this book because of that. Like, no. I like Earth. I like Earth. There's plenty of places on Earth that I still want to see yet. I'm fine with not exploring space. But I really enjoyed this book. It was, even with all the spoilers and knowing how most of it happened, like, it was still very captivating. I read it in just a couple of days, like 2 days I think, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The writing was fun. The science part of it, like, I asked my husband if like the science part of it was actually like believable, and he said for the most part it's actually very accurate. The science that he used is very accurate. There are a few things that are not, obviously, but for the most part it is really accurate, and so that was fun for me just to be able to read some of those things, because I do enjoy science just in itself and just how things work, even though half the time it does not make sense to me. Science was the most difficult subject in school for me. But overall, I gave this book 4 stars. The only reason it did not get 5 stars is because the amount of swearing in this book. I'm just like, Andy, expand your vocabulary, please. Like, there are other ways that you can express the feelings of people. You don't have to use so much swearing. Ugh. But anyway, that's why we picked up the classroom edition. My husband ordered it so that we can get rid of this one, because I was like, I don't want it on my shelf. I don't want people picking it up and reading those. Yeah, there's just so much swearing in that book. I was actually keeping track, like tally marks, and I gave up trying to count all of them because there were so many. So we picked up the classroom edition. I feel like this is actually a book that I wouldn't mind rereading because it was just that interesting, and I did actually enjoy it. I don't think I will read any more of Andy Weir's books because I've heard other things from other booktubers that I follow of just how terrible they are, and some of these booktubers don't even have like the same standards I have as far as moral things in books, but they were just like, it was terrible, it was awful, just some of his other books. So I don't think I'm going to continue with Andy Weir, but I did enjoy this one. And so if you do want to read it and you want to read the cleaned up edition, make sure you pick up the classroom edition. So yes, there's that one. Yeah, the last one that I picked up for this month was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This one was to fulfill 2 prompts actually. The read a classic that you think you should have read before. There are a lot of classics that I should have read before, so I just picked this one. But it also fulfills the prompt of reading the last book published by an author. I think this was actually her first one and the last one. Like, I'm assuming this is just the only one, but yes. So, Wuthering Heights. This is not a classic for me. I really didn't enjoy it. So when I tried to read it last year, I think it was in October, because I wanted to read a classic that has more of a spooky gothic type of vibe for the fall, whatever. And I tried reading it, and I just could not get into it. I was like, this is terrible. I don't enjoy this. I'm not enjoying this at all. But because I chose to read it for this month's challenge, I was like, I'm gonna just have to push through. And so I started over with it and started reading it, and I was getting into it a little bit more. I found a free audiobook on Spotify to listen to as I was reading it. And because I don't count audiobooks as read books, I am one of those with the unpopular opinion that audiobooks do not count as read books. They just don't. Logically, it does not make sense. You did not read the book. You listened to it. There are 2 different verbs. Read. Listen. They are 2 different things. So, I listen to audiobooks, but I don't count them as read books. I list them under the books I listened to this year, not the books I read. But there's that. It's okay if you have a different opinion. That's fine. That's just how I roll here on this channel. I don't count audiobooks as read books, but I was listening to the audiobook and reading the book at the same time so that I can count it as a read book. So, there's that. It might be a little complicated, but it's just what I did. And the audiobook actually helped me get through this book a little more, because the narrator did an excellent job of doing the different voices for the characters, and it did make the story come alive a little bit more. And so I finally finished this yesterday. I did end up finishing the rest of the book on my Kindle, because this book is an abridged version. And as I was listening to the audiobook, I was realizing that there was things missing out of this book. So I ditched it and went to the Kindle version that I had anyway. So yeah, I'm actually going to be unhauling the physical copy of Wuthering Heights because it's abridged, and I just didn't enjoy it. It's not a classic for me. I don't know a lot about the Bronte sisters. I loved Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, but yeah, this one, Wuthering Heights, I said on my Goodreads review that every single character needed Jesus. They really did. Like, everyone was just awful. Like, there were a few characters in the end that kind of changed a little bit, but they were just still so... It was just terrible. It was so much emotional, physical, and verbal abuse happening, and it was just a really dark book, and I get it. I think it would fall under the gothic classic novels. I'm not really sure, but it just wasn't for me. I don't know. If you liked it, please comment down below and give me some good pointers to, like, maybe see it in a different perspective, because I did not enjoy it. I think I only gave it 2 stars. It was still just terrible, in the sense, like, the story itself was awful. Like, why would you write such dark things? But that's just my opinion. I can see why it's a classic. It's fine, and if you enjoyed it, I would actually like to hear why you enjoyed it. But if you did not enjoy it, you can also let me know. That way I can know that I'm not alone in this. But anyway, that is it for the January wrap-up. 10 books total. Oh, I forgot! I do actually want to talk about a book that I DNF'd. One of the prompts was to read a book set on a journey. And so I had picked... I don't think I have it anymore. I had picked Wild. I can't remember the author. I'll put the picture here. It would be a nonfiction story of this lady, of how she hiked the Pacific Crest Trail after her mom died, and I believe she got a divorce. I can't really remember details, but basically I just read, like, the prologue and the first chapter, and there was some swearing and there was also just some content that I was not comfortable with, and I went on Goodreads to look up other people's reviews and things, and I actually saw Amanda's review from like 5 years ago, and what she said about it, and so I messaged her and asked her if like the content that I was seeing in the first chapter, like if it gets worse, and she said it does. And so I just decided to DNF it. The content was like she was kind of giving a little bit too explicit details about her sexual life, and I was just like, no, I don't want to read that. I'm usually a little more forgiving for certain content in memoirs and true stories, because I don't want to disregard people's stories, because that is their story, that is what they experienced, and I think everyone has the right, I guess, to share their stories, because that's how you get to know people, is them sharing their stories. But I also would not want to sit down with someone and have them go into explicit detail about what happens in the bedroom. I don't need to know that information. That is private information that should only stay between you and your husband. So I'm a Christian. I believe that sex should be saved for a husband and wife, and that is the only context that God allows it, and gives his blessing on it, and I don't want to know details of even that, and I especially don't want to know all the other details of all of the men that you slept with and the things you did. I don't want to know that. That is not content that I want to read, and so I just DNF'd it. So yeah, there's that. We're just gonna leave it at that. But anyway, that is the wrap up. I really enjoyed this month's reading, and I am looking forward to February's. I am still going to be continuing the Brighter Winter Challenge, so watch for the the February TBR coming soon. So yeah, if you read any of these books, I want to know your thoughts about them, if you enjoyed them as well, and if there are any that you have not read that you're interested in reading, I would also love to know that as well. So let's just go chat about all of the books in the comments below. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hate saying that so much. Why do I say it? She was the wife excuse me. Wow, where did the sun go? Alright, the sun went down like that, and the lighting completely changed.